As I sat shivering in front of the small fireplace, poking the barely burning embers and hugging the dog for warmth, I considered many times just going out and sitting in the van, turning it on and starting the engine and turning the heat on to full blast. But I somehow knew that if I did that, it would mean certain death. Not only for me, but my son, Greg, his friend Peter, as well as Steve and Mr. Dreshire. The van was buried in a drift of snow, rendering it immobile, and minute by minute that pile grew larger, surrounding it and us, burying us alive in the small cabin. The three boys were sitting shrouded in darkness at the furthest corners of the open room that made up majority of the cabin. They seemed to dislike the meager warmth of the fire, and when I looked over I saw their breath plumbed visibly in the air. Yet they did not shiver or complain about the cold. A part of my mind kept telling me to tie up Steve since he had murdered Jeff, one of the other Boy Scouts, earlier that day, but the thought kept slipping away like memories of a dream upon waking. The fire seemed more important somehow in the moment. The low temperature and the frost forming on the inside of the cabin slowly creeping towards me was making it hard to think of anything else. Mr. Dreshire, much like the boys, seemed to be enjoying the cold. He was no longer humming or laughing, but simply sat staring at me from the chair that he was tied to at the dining room table. My attempts at conversation were met with silence and hostility. Gibson was shivering, and I hugged her close and tossed another log onto the fire, which seemed to snuff out the remaining embers with its weight. Suddenly it felt even colder in the cabin, and the orange glow from the fire was gone, plunging us into darkness. "Shut!" "Trouble with the fire?" Mr. Dreshire asked. "No trouble, just went out for a second." I felt cold wind blowing in from the front of the cabin. It stung my face with frost, and I realized that the large wooden door was open, exposing us to the elements. But that was impossible. I had locked it myself, unless one of the boys had somehow managed to sneak over and unlock it and open the door quietly without my noticing. Had they done it? Quickly, in the darkness when the fire went out? Had they just been sitting there, waiting for the opportunity? "Who the hell opened the door?" I yelled at the boys, shining my flashlight around the room and doing a quick mental head count. The three of them were sitting in different dark corners of the room, and each one winced and hissed at me, like territorial cats when I shine the light at them. They were hard to keep track of in the shadow-filled room. I needed more light, but I was afraid to bring out the kerosene lamps. What if one of them got into their distorted minds to knock the lamp over and start a fire? The realization that they were all against me suddenly solidified in my mind the Wendigo psychosis. They all had it, and if I wasn't careful, I would be next. I got to my feet and went to the front door, pulling it closed and locking it once again. I took a look out of the small glass window at the top of the door. It was dark outside, but the light of the moon helped me see the snow still coming down, blanketing the van and making it hard to spot the snowdrift. Getting out of here was suddenly seeming more and more hopeless. Who knew if the van would even start in this cold, now that the frigidness of the night had set in? Staring at the snow coming down, I felt something scratching desperately at my leg, and I realized that I'd been standing there for a while and I had zoned completely out. I saw the moon had moved from its previous position, indicating the passage of substantial amounts of time. I was trembling violently from the cold. I noticed a sound from behind me, and I turned around to look. The room was cast into shadows, but I could see that frost was forming on every surface and nearly reaching the wood stove at the center of the room where I had been sitting. Gibson was at my feet, looking at me worriedly, pulling at my leg. She was shivering and staring up at me with her big brown eyes. A bit of frost had formed on her muzzle and her nose. Her fur glistened with it in the moonlight, and I saw that she was covered in icy specks of frost from the cold. I picked her up and brushed the ice off her and hugged her, my heart hammering with fear but not quite matching the chaotic pace of hers as I held her close to me. Walking back on unsteady legs, I found the boys were still sitting where I had left them. They made no attempt to help with the fire or do anything at all, so far as I could tell. The frost was beginning to cover their hair and faces as they watched me, unmoving. The ice, which formed like beards on them, made them look older than their age, and they watched me slightly as I surveyed them. Mr. Dreshire was likewise now covered in flecks of white frost, and his breath plumed out in front of him as he spoke. "Are you ready to join his flanks, young Mr. Grupe? He always has room for more in his house. His frozen mansion is large, and it's vast and empty, cold and dark. It is waiting for you when you are ready." "Yeah, I don't think so. That sounds kinda terrible." I began to slice pieces of kindling from the dry wood near the fireplace. At least I thought it was dry. What the hell? The entire woodpile was soaked with water, I realized. Picking up one log after another, I found each of them dripping wet. I went to the pantry and saw the entire massive jug we had brought with us, as our drinking supply was gone, along with all our food. The boys had dumped the entire jug of water on the firewood, soaking it completely and making it unusable. What they had done with the food was anyone's guess. He feeds on your hunger and fear. I remembered Mr. Dreshire saying this. Was that what they were trying to do? Starve me and terrify me? Because it was working. I sat in front of the embers that had once been a fire. They were barely smouldering as I stuck my hands into the stove, attempting to gain a bit of warmth, any that I could get from it. My hands were trembling and shaking badly, but calmed a little when they soaked up a bit of warmth from inside the fireplace. The heat seemed to rejuvenate my mind, and I was able to think clearly for a minute. Struggling to conceive of what to do, I decided to improvise. I took the axe and hacked the dining room chairs into pieces, cutting them up smaller and smaller. I threw them on the fire and set them alight. The varnish made them catch quickly, and although the fumes were highly toxic and smelled terrible, it warmed us. Gibson and I huddled close to the fire, and I put my hands up. Watching the three boys closely out of the corner of my eye, I cut up more pieces of furniture, whatever I could cut into small pieces, a table from the corner, picture frames and books, board games and ornaments, family heirlooms and knickknacks. Everything went into the fire. The frost, which was spreading inside the cabin like a virus, began to retreat slightly with the warmth of it, and the light which glowed forth from the hearth. To hell with it, I decided. I grabbed the kerosene lanterns and lit them, turning the dials all the way up to bring the wicks out and cause the flames to burn bright and hot, scorching the glass, causing black smoke to pour out. I didn't care. The room was suddenly bright and warm and filled with toxic fumes. That I am sure. Fuck it. All boys stared at me from the corners of the room. With the lights and the warmth came a bit of sanity, it seemed. "I want to go home," said Greg softly. "How?" I asked him. "I don't even know how we're going to get out of here. The cell phone is gone. I have no signal to begin with. We need help to get out of here. We're trapped." "Smoke signals, Dad," said Greg, my son. His eyes looked human again as he walked on shaking legs towards the fireplace and soaked up the heat from it. Peter walked over too, although Steve stayed sulking quietly in the corner. "What's that, son?" I asked, hopeful that this wasn't another trick being played on me by the Wendigo. "Smoke signals. He hates the heat. The fire will keep him away in the smoke. The smoke might draw somebody if we can get a big enough signal." The boathouse. I realized suddenly what I needed to do, but the Wendigo would be waiting just outside, and I was sure of it. Using the kerosene from the lanterns, I made an impromptu Molotov cocktail. I stuffed a dish towel inside an old liquor bottle and then set the end on fire. I opened the front door of the cabin and threw it as hard as I could towards the bathhouse. The flaming bottle filled with kerosene smashed against the side of the wooden structure, and it caught alight. Despite the howling wind, the fire spread quickly with the volatile propellant, and soon enough the entire building was on fire. I saw the Wendigo step out from his hiding place in the woods where he had been waiting for us. He made eye contact with me, backing away from the giant pyre and retreating into the forest. The fire would bring more people, assuming somebody saw it, and he didn't want to be seen by anyone. Once he was gone, and with the fire burning high into the sky, everyone's sanity seemed to return slightly. Even Steve looked clear-eyed and remorseful as I saw him walk towards the pantry and look inside. "Oh no, what did I do, Mr. Grupe? I killed Jeff." I wasn't quite sure of what to make of that. Were they actually clear from this strange spell, or were they just waiting for me to let my guard down? I didn't know if I could trust them or not. As the fire blazed higher into the night, the winter storm eased and dissipated until it was completely gone. With the snow no longer coming down heavily from above, the inferno became more obvious, and the glow of it was probably visible from a great distance. The sound of a helicopter eventually became audible, and the noise got louder and louder as it approached and landed on the icy surface of the lake near the cabin. I would later find out that someone else had been visiting the lake as well that weekend. They had been enticed by the reports of pleasant weather as well, but had also found themselves overtaken by that sudden storm. Luckily for us, their cell phone signal was slightly better at the other end of the lake, and when the snow eased up, they looked outside and saw the inferno, calling 911 at the sight of it. Fortunately, the fire died before it could spread to any of the surrounding trees or cabins that we were in. The kids told their stories as truthfully as they could, and of course no one believed any of it. Steve was arrested and subsequently found innocent by reason of insanity of the murder of Jeff. Ricky's body was never found, and ultimately I was cleared of any wrongdoings since his parents had agreed to his participation and understood the risks, although Wendigos were never mentioned in the permission slip, so I guess I got away with that one there. Peter's parents tell me he's never been the same since the events of the weekend, and I can definitely relate. Greg has never quite been the same either. He's been acting odd ever since it happened. We get together sometimes and talk about it, how their behaviors are the worst in the winter, when it gets its coldest, when they're hungry and when they're lonely. In the darkness of night, that's when they do strange things. I really hope they don't have anything to do with the reports of all the missing people around town, because those crimes are ongoing and still haven't been solved. The people always go missing in winter on the nights when it's the coldest, when the snow is falling steadily and the black clouds are rolling in, blocking the light of the moon. That's when the hunt begins. Hello everyone, Grim here. Wasn't that an amazing end for the tale? Now, this is the fourth and final part to I Took My Scout Troop Up North to Earn Their Winter Camping Badges, story written by the amazingly talented Jordan. I have, as always, put his link and details in the description below, so if you would like to read some of his stories yourself, you are more than welcome to do so. One quick extra bit of note about this also, as I have completed the series, I will be collecting all of the tales together as one and uploading them a little bit later. So those who may have missed something or just want to hear it all uninterrupted are welcome to jump on and look at that when it comes out. If you liked my narration today, please give it a like and a subscribe, as every single one of you that jump on will be 100% entertained by the randomness that I can do with the help of the incredibly talented authors within my life. Now, I won't drag this out because that's one thing that I'm apparently freaking good at. So instead, be safe wherever you are, and have yourself a good night or day. This is Grim, and I'm signing off.